One of the best pieces of advice I've heard just listening to tons of entrepreneurs now and people on this journey is that the best time to make a change is the first time that you think about it. And I think that is just really true. Anything after that is analysis paralysis.
Welcome to the Physicians and Properties Podcast, the show where we teach you how investing in real estate can give you the freedom to practice medicine and live life how you want.
Doctor!
Now, here's your host, Dr. Alex Schlo.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Physicians and Properties Podcast. I'm so glad you're here. And as always, I'm your host, Dr. Alex Schlo. Today we have a really awesome episode for you. This was actually a physician, Dr. Akshita Mehta, who I met through a phone call. And if you don't know this, on the Physicians and Properties website, you can actually book a call directly with me, and we'll talk about your goals and your real estate investing journey. I'm happy to help in any way and talk to you about anything. And Akshita reached out to me through there and booked a call, and we had an awesome time talking about residential assisted living investing, different forms of real estate investing. And it was so exciting for me to just learn about her journey. She actually got started investing in real estate while she was in residency, which is really cool. If you're listening to this and you're a resident and you're like, hey, I don't know how I can do that, she's a perfect example. In this episode, we talk all about her journey into the personal finance and real estate world, some really good resources she used for education to get started. We talked about a course that she did and how that course provided confidence for her to go ahead and get her first rental property. And they did the course in 2020. A few months later, bought their first deal, a duplex. And a few months later after that, they bought another duplex, both out of state, both pretty much sight unseen, and really cool stories on how she acquired those properties. We talk about the important team members that you need to have, the core four for out of state real estate investing. You need a good realtor, a good contractor, a good property manager, and a good CPA. Those are the core four that are really important. We talk about how to build that team and how to find that team. We also discussed their journey going forward and their goals going forward, which actually sounds like it may be in the residential assisted living space. Akshita is doing big things, and she's even going to be having their second baby in a couple weeks and took the time to come on this podcast. So if you learned anything during this podcast, and I know that you will, it's a great one for those folks who are getting started. If you learned anything, please send this to a friend that you think could benefit from it. Give us a 5-star review and rating, and that would be incredible. All right. Well, without any further ado, let's get to today's episode with Dr. Akshita Mehta. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Physicians and Properties Podcast. Today, I have a really special guest, actually her first podcast ever. Dr. Akshita Mehta is here with us tonight. It's going to be awesome. Akshita, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited you're here too. Sounds like you got some big developments in the family that are happening soon with expecting a new baby. So I'm glad we were able to make this happen, and congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, we are just a couple weeks away, so we're getting very excited.
That's awesome. Well, excited for you. It's going to be a blast and some sleepless nights, I'm sure, but it'll be all worth it.
Yes, lots of sleepless nights coming our way, but it's our second, so we a little
There
bit
you
more,
go.
I think.
Well, you have to let us know how that goes with the second one. We just have one 2.5-year-old named Jack, and I feel like he just now started sleeping well. So I'm scared to introduce a baby into the mix and see what happens.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what we were thinking. We finally got our first to sleep through the night, and I guess we figured we'd throw it all to the fire and have another one, but
There
it's
you
good.
go. Yeah, absolutely. Well, it sure will be. Well, really glad to have you on the show tonight. Thanks for making the time to come on. And I'm sure folks will be able to learn a lot from your story. So if you don't mind, we'll just kind of get started with how you got into medicine and kind of your journey throughout medicine. And then, of course, that'll lead us into your real estate adventures as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I went to med school in DC and went to GW, and I think my path to medicine was pretty traditional, and kind of always knew that I wanted to go into radiology, and that's what I did. And so went to residency and fellowship in Dallas. So after med school, moved down to Texas, which was a huge change, and that was great. And then got my first job in Austin. So I moved down here to Austin, where I am right now. I'm practicing as a neuroradiologist currently. And so that was all just within the past couple months, and it's been going really well too.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm originally from Virginia, kind of Northern
Nice.
Virginia area. Yeah, so spent a lot of time in DC, big DC sports fan, and really excited for the Washington Commanders football season starting off 2-0 for the first time in like 13 years. So finally
You're
some
right.
hope.
I was a little heartbreaking growing up around Maryland on the other side of the river there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough team to root for, but glad they're doing a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. I used to always tell folks that I was just used to a disappointment with how the DC sports teams were for a while. And then big baseball fan, the Nationals took off on the World Series, which was great. Now we're in that building phase and the Capitals winning the Stanley Cup. So DC sports are looking up. So absolutely. Well,
That's
that's
good.
really cool. Yeah, isn't it? That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, how has the transition been from residency now as a practicing neuroradiologist? How's that been for you?
It's been awesome. It's been really great, and yeah, I'm sure we'll get into this more, but also made the transition into real estate and a whole nother life of entrepreneurship and investing and something totally different. So it's been really exciting for both of those things to kind of come to fruition together and really frame, how I want to practice and what I want my practice to look like. And so that's been kind of a work in progress and a really exciting time.
Yeah, it's super exciting. And you started investing in real estate during residency, correct?
Yeah. So real estate was something I kind of always knew that I wanted to do. I had no idea how, but it was one of those things in college and probably even in high school. It was kind of always on Zillow and looking at housing and prices. And at that time, it was probably more interest in interior design and looking at pretty homes. But as I went through, I started thinking about investing in it. And when I got to residency, I was learning a lot about personal finance. And that was something that I was really interested in. I was finally getting a paycheck, which I hadn't gotten before, and I had no idea what to do with this thing. And so I was sort of listening to podcasts and reading what I could and just trying to soak up as much information as I could. And then I figured real estate investing would probably come towards the end of training when I was hopefully starting to build up a little bit more capital in order to be able to do it. And so, really, just by happenstance, I was in my third year of residency in 2020, and this crazy pandemic hit. And all of the residents essentially went to call shifts. And so I was working overnight. And one of the people that I was following, trying to learn about personal finance, was Peter Kim and the Passive Income
Mhm.
MD folks. And so he put on this really cool webinar with a bunch of physicians who apparently were doing incredible things in tons of entrepreneurial spaces. And so there was a whole section dedicated to real estate. And I thought, all right, well, I'm working at night. I have some time during the day to listen and maybe see if I can find a way to get started with this thing. And so that was my introduction to semi retired MD and ended up taking the Zero to Freedom course that summer. So my
Nice.
husband and I did it together. Everything just kind of snowballed from there. We got a lot more serious about investing in real estate. And I think meaning behind that was a lot of also me getting towards the end of residency and trying to decide, well, what do I want my career as a physician to look like? Medicine has so many things going on with it. For a lot of us, it wasn't exactly what we maybe thought it was going to be. And so this seemed like a really cool way to make it what I want. So that was a huge part of our why, and part of our goals was one day, hopefully I could practice the way that I want to practice or the way that I feel is safest for patients to practice. And so real estate was just kind of this perfect path to do that.
That's awesome. What a cool story. 2020, yeah, I feel like a lot of folks definitely learned a whole lot about real estate and probably had a little bit extra time too, and different shifts, like you said, working on the night shift. What were some resources in the beginning that you found really helpful as you were kind of starting your journey for personal finance and then into real estate? And I know you mentioned the Zero to Freedom course too. I definitely want to talk to you about that and how that impacted your real estate.
Yeah. So personal finance, I was all over the map, just sort of listening to anything that I could find. Most of it was podcasts. I, did residency at this huge university. Campus was huge. So just walking between places, I would listen to a podcast, walking my car, when I would jog, anytime that I could, I would try and pop something on. So I was listening to, I think I started with So Money by Farnoosh Torabi. That's like a really
Mhm.
famous one, Mr. Money Mustache. I
Yep.
found Bigger Pockets, which is a huge finance one. So a lot of just kind of generic personal finance podcasts. Choose a Five is another big one. They're
Mhm.
they're pretty big. I think they're still growing and massive, and they had a
Yeah.
lot of really,
Yeah.
really good information. And then as I started honing more towards real estate, the first big thing we did was the Zero to Freedom course. And as a resident, it was, this expensive thing that we hadn't really thought about doing before, but man, did it provide a huge amount of value. And so that was long-term rentals. It was, of course, about long-term rentals and multifamily and getting interested in that. And so that was our big jump start into learning a little bit more about the real estate world.
That's awesome. Was
Yeah.
it difficult for you to get your husband on board, or was he like, "Hey, let's do this"?
It's funny. So I was always interested in finance and he kind of was as well. But he was the one that really pushed me to the entrepreneurial side. He has this great W-2 job. And, I was always very type A, you do things this way and you work really hard and get this good paying job. And then that's just kind of what you do. And so somewhere probably around early residency, he told me one day, I think I want to start my own business. I think I want to do my own thing. And I was like, you're crazy. You've got a good job. Well, I'm going to have a good job. Like, we're going to be fine. And why would you want to take the risk and do something like that? And it was just totally against my personality. But we kept talking about it and he kept talking to me about how he wanted to do it and all the benefits. And I think eventually over time, I definitely warmed up to it and I am all about it now. And so when this opportunity to take this course came up, it was really kind of a melding of interests. So it was really easy to get him on board, luckily. And he's frankly been doing a lot of the heavy lifting for the real estate while I've been finishing fellowship and kind of starting as a junior attending. So for us, it's been a really happy marriage between him wanting to do the entrepreneurial stuff, my specific interest in real estate, and he kind of jumped on board.
That's awesome. My wife Stephanie is super supportive too. She loves real estate investing as well. She's a big fan of the short-term rentals because she really likes the interior design aspect and the photographing and staging and all that. So that's been really fun to do that together. And it's just such a game changer to know you have your spouse's support and to work together towards, financial freedom. It's just really fun too. We really enjoy it. So that's really cool to hear the same for you guys.
Yeah, and there were so many things about it that just made sense. We, learned about reps and so many other benefits that
Yeah.
could potentially come from us being able to do this jointly together. And again, I think just the possibility of building this passive income through real estate means everything, right? It means that
Mhm.
you can kind of live your life the way that you want. You can focus on the projects that you're really, really passionate about. And so I think we both just saw a lot of value from pursuing it together.
Yeah, absolutely. In the Zero to Freedom course, would you say that was kind of the pivot point where you're like, all right, now it's time to take action? Or did that give you a lot of confidence to get to that point where it's like, all right, it's time to start buying some properties?
Yeah, I think up until that point, I'd been learning a little bit about real estate on my own, but there's nothing like someone just really jump starting that
Mhm.
education and someone who has had a lot of experience doing something that you're interested in doing, who's made a lot of the mistakes or figured out really good systems that make things go faster. And I think they just did it really well, and they designed the course to be really digestible, easy to follow, and easy to take action after. So that was definitely the initial pivot point. And since then, we've thought about so many other areas of real estate and try to learn about short-term rentals and syndication and all these other things, and
Mhm.
trying to see, where our future in real estate is going to be. But that was definitely the pivotal jumping start, I think.
Very cool. How long after finishing the course did you guys buy your first rental property?
Yeah, so we took the course the summer of 2020. The first one, we closed on our first duplex January of 21. And then, yeah, things just went really well from there. We closed on our second one March of 21, just a couple months later. And so it was a couple months for sure of putting out bids and not getting them and losing deals. And that's just the reality of how things
Yeah.
go, especially at that time when a ton of people, like you said, got interested in real estate. But we ended up getting one, and then a couple months later, we were able to close on our second. So
That's
that's
awesome. And those were both duplexes, is that correct?
mhm. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, if you don't mind, let's kind of talk about what that process was like finding them and putting them under contract. This being the first one, like what were some fears that you had? We'll just kind of walk through the process and some tips and tricks that you might have learned along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think just like anything, the fear comes from not having done it before, and I
Hmm.
think that's why a lot of the really good advice we tend to hear over and over again is
Yeah.
just get started.
Yeah.
Just get started, get your feet wet, and you learn so much along the process. So I think the fear was, well, what if this doesn't work out? What if we don't get tenants? What if all of the what ifs always
Yeah.
come to mind? There's endless limiting beliefs if you let them creep in. But ultimately, we learned, through that course, I think, how to do things with a little bit more of a systematic approach that gave us confidence. And at the end of the day, it really came down to numbers. And once we had learned a little bit more, read a little bit more on our own as well, talked to some other folks, it didn't feel as much of a gamble. We could
Yeah.
understand what the numbers were. We knew where they were coming from, plug them into a calculator, and if it made sense, we would put an offer. And if it didn't, and a
Yeah.
lot of properties at that time were going for cash only offers or way above asking or at prices that don't provide a cash on cash value then at that point.
Yeah.
And so it ended up being kind of easy in some ways. Once we were really comfortable with our calculator and our parameters, what we were going to say yes to, what we wouldn't say yes to, we had a good realtor that was working with us as well. And he knew what we were looking for, kind of our whole team set up. It ended up being really quick. And actually, our second duplex was a funny story. We initially were looking in the DFW area, and after months of putting out offers and getting beat by these cash only, offers, I started looking into some other markets. And so our second one is in Arkansas. And before really buying a duplex or putting offers out, we figured, well, hey, let's go up there and try and form a team and get all of those pieces in place. And so we were talking to a realtor, and as we were driving up, he texted me, and I hadn't heard from him in probably weeks at that point. He texted me and said, "Hey, I have this duplex that just came on the market, or it was an off market deal actually, but he just got this duplex and was wondering if we were interested." And we hadn't been to the city yet, hadn't met many other folks on our team. And still on this drive before making it there, we just accepted. It was plug and play and we knew what all of our variables were. And so we ended up getting the second just on a random chance that we were driving up to the city. So I think we maybe drove past it just for fun at
Yeah.
night because we went like on a Friday after work, could barely see it, and we were like, "All right, well, there it is, it exists," and we froze like that weekend.
Wow.
So yeah, it's pretty
That's
funny.
awesome. Yeah, it's a really cool story. What was your guys' buy box, or what kind of metrics and numbers were you looking for these deals, or what made a good deal for you?
Yeah, it was really the percentage of, cash on
Mhm.
cash essentially that we were
Yeah.
looking for. And when we're starting, I mean, anywhere from like around 10 essentially was our
Mhm.
goal. And obviously if we could find something bigger or knew that over time we could inflate that number, then
Yeah.
then that was great. But something around there was kind of a starting point for us who hadn't really done a whole lot of this before. And so we just used kind of all of the normal parameters. We found a property management company and knew exactly what they were going to charge, the percentage, leasing fees. We had an estimate of the vacancies for both of the properties. And then we knew what interest rates there were. We were working pretty closely with lenders. So it's easy to kind of plug in some numbers. It's
Yeah.
nice.
Were you worried about buying an out-of-state investment?
Not really. Not
Yeah.
really. I mean, once we had done the first one, the second one seemed very templated. Even though it was out of state, we had a very similar team there, and it seemed pretty straightforward once we had done the first one.
That's great. That was the answer I was hoping for. Yeah, people I feel like get really afraid about buying out of state real estate, and it's another limiting belief. And honestly, I found that the real estate that we bought that's out of state is actually easier because it kind of removes yourself from the equation. Like you don't have the temptation to be like, oh, I'll just drive up and fix this. That you have to find
Yeah,
somebody to go fix it. And those sorts of things. So it actually makes it a little bit more passive, I think. In our opinion and in our experience that we've had. I mean, shoot, we've kind of pivoted towards assisted living and we've talked about that before you and I. And in Phoenix, and we've bought in 3 out there, and I haven't seen a single one other than like the eye guide and the video and some pictures, and that's it. So need to make a trip to Phoenix soon and see them. But yeah, just once you get that first one, once you start taking action, once that first rent check clears, then it's game on. And
yeah.
it sounds like it was the same for you guys as well.
You see the power behind it and the excitement, that comes from knowing that you got a good deal or feeling like you're closing on something that can provide value to the tenants that are renting from you.
Yeah.
So all of that was really cool. And yeah, I haven't seen either of them. My husband, I think, saw our first one. I was still in training and couldn't go. I think one day when him and our
Yeah.
contractor were going out there to see what kind of reno and rehab we were gonna do. And then yeah, we drove past that second one that one night just kind of for fun,
Yeah.
but neither of us have been inside of it. But we've seen pictures from inspections and things, and it's
Yeah.
good enough.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You mentioned a team a couple of times. If someone's getting started, do you have any advice on who are important members to the team and maybe how you found them?
Yeah, so I think that is definitely a key part of getting started because that's where a lot of your numbers come from. That's where a lot of your variables come from. And so I think it would have been a lot tougher to buy a duplex, to be in the middle of the deal, come to find, oh, well, property management's actually going to be this much or
Yeah.
this much, or, I thought I was going to be able to get a loan for this rate, but that's not actually the case, and all of the above. So I think having that team in place first minimizes the questions and it makes it feel much more like an educated decision as opposed to a gamble, which is really nice when you're investing and especially if you're investing a decent amount of money. And so I think all of the things that are some of our team members are, we have a really good CPA who can help us with that side of things. We've got a real estate realtor or like an investor and someone who's specific to a realtor who works with investors, who knows what investors are looking for and knows how to close those deals, knows what's going to be important. It's very different than someone who is a realtor really working with people searching for a primary home. The parameters are different and they know when to bring you deals, they know when not to bring you deals, and can tell you certain things about the property that you're going to be interested in. When am I going to be replacing this roof? What kind of maintenance is this going to cost? And tons of things like that. So having a really good realtor is helpful. A lender, right? Someone that you work
Mhm.
closely with, someone who also, if you've done multiple deals, they may have a lot of your information on file. They can get you that letter really quickly saying that you're going to be able to afford this property and move the deal along, especially if it's something that other people are interested in too, or a deal could go very quickly. Having a good relationship with a lender can go a really long way. A
Mhm.
contractor as well, a big part of, I think, what a lot of us have found valuable and part of the strategy is to purchase the multifamily unit, but then to add a little bit of rehab or renovation to elevate those market rents, get a better rate of return than maybe what the prior owner was getting. And so understanding what those rental costs are going to be is also really helpful. So that was another member that we wanted to make sure was part of our team and we can run some of that information by them prior to closing. So we have a good idea of what that cash on cash is going to look like.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, the core four, you hit them. The realtor, the contractor, the lender is super important. And I'm blanking on the fourth one. You said four, and I'm blanking on the fourth one you just
No,
said.
I mentioned this
Yeah, the
too.
CPA. Yeah, yeah. All right, super important CPA. Amanda Hahn, we recorded an episode a couple weeks ago. She's from Keystone CPA. She's been on Bigger Pocket. She's incredible. So, Amanda, we didn't forget about you here. CPA, very important. It was the first one that you mentioned. Yeah, absolutely. And super important for doctors and how you can utilize real estate for tax savings. And, we're fortunate to have typically a higher W-2 than most. And so real estate can be really helpful to offset that. So yeah, that's awesome. You mentioned renovation. Did you guys do a decent amount of renovation on these duplexes?
Yeah, so luckily we're actually friends with a really good contractor in the DFW area. And so for our first one, we had him do all the reno on that first duplex and just someone we could really trust and did a phenomenal job. So we did. And that was part of the interest of doing these multifamilies and long-term rentals as well. Part of the passion behind it. We were trying to buy properties that are inhabited by really hard working people, but just, folks that maybe don't make quite as much. And so we were lucky enough with both of the duplexes to keep the tenants that were there previously. But come to find that the duplex that we bought had terrible things that they were living through, right? There was part of the floor in one of the bedrooms had been torn up and there was essentially just concrete and there was infestation of other things. And so it was just really rewarding to be able to take all of that out, give them new flooring, new everything really, and just be able to provide them with a really safe. And that's been kind of the fun of doing real estate as well. It's not just an investment. There's a little bit more purpose behind it. As a physician, you can think about all of the different parts of our lives that go into our health. And if someone is living with mold or living with rats or living with these crazy things that they maybe don't find valuable enough to, or don't have the money to fix, part of what we wanted to do was make sure that we're providing people with safe places to live where they can come home and things aren't breaking on them. And, the air they're breathing in is hopefully a little bit better than what they had before if we find certain problems. So that was definitely part of something that we were interested in adding value that way.
Yeah, and you added so much value to their lives, I'm sure, and they probably loved having you guys as landlords. Are they still tenants with y'all now?
Yeah, so we have still been able to keep them. I think actually one of the units, one of the tenants in the Arkansas duplex, someone ended up passing away, but we were able to get new ones pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But other than that, yeah, we've been able to keep them around, and so that's been really nice. And they've had a really low vacancy rate, which is super helpful. But yeah, being able to provide that value to just a safe space to come home. I mean, who doesn't feel better when you're able to come home to a place that feels a little bit nicer? So
That's really noble of you guys to do that and provide, an excellent place for them to live. So yeah, I'm sure they're very appreciative of that. That's really cool. Do you guys see yourself sticking with a small multifamily in the future? Or are you're looking into branching into other real estate asset classes? What's kind of the thought there?
yeah, so it's kind of how we met. Yeah, we have been doing the long-term rentals, and there's so much value there. The multifamily is great, but I think we kind of decided that we want to go in a little bit of a new direction, and so we're literally looking into residential assisted living now, and that's hopefully our 2024 goals if we're lucky. And so there's a ton behind that. I think getting a lot more entrepreneurial. There's is a totally different asset class than doing something like multifamily or long-term rental. We are probably looking into doing the business part of it as well, in addition to the real estate part of it. We'll see what we find and how things go, but that's kind of the intent right now. So it's going to be significantly more hands-on. But I think it's twofold. I think one, the returns on residential assisted living can be phenomenal and just needed something to kind of kickstart a little bit more. And then as opposed to the duplexes. And two, there's also just so much value to add there as well. I think a big part of what I want to do here is sort of taking that physician mindset and trying to improve quality of life for people in other areas, not that may not be just strictly medicine, but kind of intertwine that with real estate where I can. With the aging population, I mean, this is no secret, right? There's so much need for everything, all kinds of help, all kinds of care. We're also entering generations where there's a lot more dual working households now. There may not be kids who are available to take care of aging parents as they may have been a little bit more prevalent in older generations. And so many other reasons is why we think this is a good idea. But yeah, again, I think we can just add a ton of value. I think the returns also are really, really great to think about and to look at. And so for both of those reasons, we're hopefully shifting next year.
That's awesome. Well, it's just kind of a different multifamily property, it's just a little bit more of a geriatric population. But that's really cool. Yeah. I mean, obviously we love residential assisted living homes, and I've talked a lot about it on the show and just how great of an asset class it is. And you're right. You kind of alluded to owning both the real estate and the operations piece of it.
Mhm.
One way is, of course, to own just the real estate and lease that out to an operator on a commercial lease. So that's what we're currently doing for our 3 homes that we have. And then we're looking right now, as you and I talked about it, starting to also own the operations piece as well, which is definitely a lot more work, but it's certainly more cash flow in that. So we're trying to figure out, okay, where's the balance? Are we ready to take this on right now? But I think that, you hit the nail on the head as a physician. We have so much value that we can add to these homes and can provide better care for them. And the family members of the residents feel so much more comforted knowing like, hey, this is owned by a physician, even though we're not going to be the ones that are providing the care for them hands on, but at least we're overseeing that. And they know that, hey, there's a physician who really cares for my mom or for my dad here that's staying in this home. So yeah, it's really cool. I'm excited for you guys.
Thanks. And I think it really is twofold, like you mentioned. I mean, one, we want people to feel comfortable if they're going to move into a home or live in a place. You obviously want them to feel happy and comfortable where they are, but also the kids as well, or the other family members that may be
Yeah.
surrounding or supporting that decision to be able to provide a place where they can feel comfortable as well and not feel stressed about, how are we going to care for mom or dad or aunt or uncle or grandma or grandpa, whoever it is, and to be able to minimize, any of that stress is would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's almost like you guys said, with your mission with the duplexes going into a place that needs some work and needs some renovation and providing just a really high class property for them to stay in that maybe would not have been as accessible. And I think it's the same way in residential assisted living. I mean, we as doctors certainly all know and have had that horror experience of going into a nursing home or a residential assisted living home and being very surprised that people were living in these conditions. And so that's one thing that we really value is providing, really A-class home for our residents to stay in and get care. And it fits right into your guys' mission and model perfectly as well.
Yeah, it'll be a fun transition. And you hit on
Yeah.
something else there. Yeah, this will also be a
Yeah.
transition away from more BC class properties that we were initially investing in. We weren't necessarily putting in the highest grade materials that, we're putting granite into these things or quartz and things like that, but just functional materials
Right.
that held up and worked well and were viable. But with a residential assisted living, it's going to be probably catering to a different asset class. So that'll be a fun part of the journey to learn
Yeah.
more and transition along the way.
Yeah, that'll be really fun for you. You guys said, kind of pivoting back to the multifamily properties you have, that you're using a property manager. Is that correct?
We are, yeah.
Yeah. How has that been for you?
It's been great. I think from the beginning, we knew we wanted to be pretty hands off. We wanted this to be as passive as possible. We're both still working. And until we can get to a place where one of us hopefully can pull away from W-2 and then the other person can pull away, that's kind of the goal. Yeah, being as passive as possible was the way that we wanted to do it. And that was another huge benefit of going through a group of physicians or just a group of people who were all investing in a similar asset class we could kind of pull together. And so we use a property management company that a ton of other folks in the group were using as well. And we were able to get a little bit of a discount doing that, bringing all of us together. So tons of value of either, I think, taking courses or just finding mentors or
Yeah.
people around you who are doing something similar to help jumpstart you forward and can help in tons of different ways.
Yeah, and I'm sure you can relate, especially the physician real estate investor community. Like we all are, I think, very approachable and very willing to help in any way possible. There are so many deals that still exist out there. There's plenty of deals for everybody. And more importantly, like we want people to have the opportunity to realize how real estate can impact their ability to practice medicine and live life how they want to and have that freedom both in the hospital and at home. And there's no shortage. So if you're listening to this and you're just wanting to get started, reach out to me, reach out to Dr. Mehta. We want to help you. And there's tons of communities out there that want to help you, not just physicians of properties. So absolutely don't hesitate to reach out. And you brought up a really important point too. I think oftentimes folks who are just getting started think that they have to start from scratch. You don't. There's a lot of resources out there. There's a lot of people who have done this before you. So find someone who's a couple steps above you and just follow exactly what they're doing. If they've been successful, chances are they've learned along the way and they'll be willing to share some failures with you and help you in terms of success and pull you up along with them. So there's definitely a lot of ways to get started and to succeed in the real estate investing space.
Yeah, and a lot of areas of real estate investing are pretty tried and true at this point. There are a lot of templates out there, tons of
Yeah.
resources that are great. And it may not be as hard to really just plug and play and to have find a good mentor and be able to move forward. But again, to what you're saying, a huge benefit of this is also getting a lot of physicians to be able to practice the way that they want. There's so many stressors for our job now, and it just keeps going up and up. And
Yeah.
ultimately, I think we all just want to provide good care. We want to provide great patient care, whatever that looks like, and whatever
Mhm.
kind of practice that you're dealing with. So that's been a really fun part of this journey. Be a part of this physician space and watch people change their practice in ways that are incredible. I think I was
Yeah.
listening to a podcast the other day, and there was an orthopedic surgeon on who had been investing in real estate for a while. ended up being able to get enough passive income to cover expenses. And I've just been working pro bono for like 4 years or something
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
And, with that just comes so much power. You get to sit down with your patients. You actually get to listen to them and do an exam and take a history and all these things that are so basic, but we find difficult to do with all of our constraints in the world. And I'd love to be able to practice radiology and just spend as much time as I need on a case, be able to call a
Mhm.
referring clinician and talk about someone's onc treatment, the history behind what I'm looking at and what's been going on with them. And so it's a really powerful thing, and it's been able to, I think, change the lives of a lot of physicians and the way that they practice, and hopefully a lot more to come. But whatever that looks like for you or whatever you're interested in, I think there's always a way to do it and a way to go about it, whether it's passive or active. There's options for everything under the sun to get involved.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I don't know if you're talking about Dr. Tom Burns, but he was an orthopedic surgeon, first episode of this podcast, actually. And yeah, he practiced a lot of pro bono medicine. And he was saying that his PA made way more than he did for like the last 10 years of his practice, and how he would just go in and be like, "Hey, I'm Tom. I heard you have a sore knee." And just talk to him about whatever, and it was so refreshing for him to be able to spend an hour with him if he wanted to. And that's an orthopedic surgeon. And we all know they're just really quick to get in there, get out and get to cutting. So it was really cool to hear his journey and hear his story and how real estate investing and passive income had impacted that. There's a lot of physicians who are doing amazing things. And, we're doing amazing things under the current healthcare stressors that we're all under. Imagine a world where you have passive income coming in and you don't have to see as many patients and you can spend more time with them. And it'll just make you a better doctor, provide way better care for patients. And patients are going to be so much happier and healthier. I mean, it's why I do it too. I can't wait for the opportunity and the time to really practice medicine how I want to. That's really cool.
Absolutely. I think there's so much to unpack there. And for everyone, it's going to look a little bit different. But I think we're all here because we want to take good care of patients and we want to do the right thing. And so many people are burnt out by how they practice. So it gives them all of the opportunities to practice however you want or however much you want or whatever's going to make you the happiest, because then ultimately your patients are going to benefit from that.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. That's fantastic. What do you see, or where do you see you guys in the next 5 years, or kind of what's your 5 year goals if you're willing to share it on the podcast here?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that's another huge part of the entrepreneurial journey, right? Is kind of figuring out, well, why are we doing this? What are our goals? Anything's gonna require work and time and effort. And so it's always good to think about those things because that's what helps bring it to fruition, I think. So our short-term goals are for both of us to pull back from W-2. So actually starting in January, I'm gonna be essentially doing contract work and
Oh,
working
cool.
1099 and kind of being able to make my own schedule. So that's sort of our biggest first step, which is really exciting. And my husband, he is currently still working his W-2 job. When things settle down with new baby, and hopefully if we can get some residential assisted living going, then our goal is for him to pull back as well. And both of us, I mean, really just want to work however we want. We also have a ton of other projects and businesses that we've talked about now that we want to start but need a lot more time to do those well. And so when he can pull back and then when I can pull back, we'll probably transition to some other business ideas that we've had in tons of different spaces. And that's kind of our 5 year goal, is to be able to get there, I think, where we're passive enough where we can both pull back.
That's awesome. Well, I don't doubt that you'll get there. I mean, how fast things have been moving for you guys and all the exciting things in the future, especially with the new baby as well. Again, congratulations. That's exciting, and excited to follow along with you in your journey going forward. So I'm really glad that we met and really glad to have you on the podcast today.
Thanks. I mean, you as well. It's so cool to see how you've already delved into residential assisted living. It'll be cool to hear the operating side of it if you guys end up getting into that. And I'm
Yeah.
sure we'll have tons of other chats along the way this upcoming
Yeah.
year, us trying to get into the space too. So it'll be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. Is there anything you feel like we missed, or any good advice that you want to give to the audience? You've already provided a ton of value, so no pressure. But if there's anything else, I wanted to give you the opportunity.
I think one of the best pieces of advice I've heard just listening to tons of entrepreneurs now and people on this journey is that the best time to make a change is the first time that you think about it. And I think that is just really true. Anything after that is analysis paralysis, right? And it's so easy to get stuck into, oh man, I've had this dream for 5 years now, and I don't know if I can bring it to fruition. I don't know if this is something that I'm actually going to be able to do. But if you've had the thought of changing, X, Y, and Z, if it's your practice, if it's the way that you invest, the way that you think about money, the way that money affects your life, then just take action, get started. And so many people, I think, have said the same thing, where I think the best piece of advice they've heard is just to get started, because that's where you're really going to learn, is this right for me? Isn't that right for me? Lots of trial and error, and finding the whatever niche it is that you end up finding through playing around with whatever investment that is, or practice model, etc. So if you've had a thought of making a change in some area, just try it, see if it works. There's always
Absolutely.
ways to go back or change it.
Yeah, a lot of people are like always worried. If you're looking in the community of folks who are trying to get completely out of their W-2, they're always worried about like, well, what's going to happen, or what if I fail? The worst thing that's going to happen probably if you fail is you go ask for your job back, or you get another job. Like, even if that's the worst thing, like, why not take the leap and get started? And so you really hit the nail on the head there, just taking action, taking one step forward, and then just another one and another one. And that's going to compound. And the next thing you know, you've climbed to the top of the mountain. So really cool and really exciting. And you are a perfect example of that. So thanks for sharing that. If folks want to reach out to you, learn more about what you guys are doing, or connect with you, how can they get a hold of you?
So email is probably the best way to do that. So our real estate email, manager@houseventuresllc.com. It's probably the best way to reach out, and we check that all the time, and happy to talk to anyone or chat with anyone about your journey, and would love to connect.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we'll be sure to include that in the show notes. Well, with that, it's been Dr. Mehta and Dr. Alex Schlo with another episode of the Physicians and Properties Podcast, signing off. Hey, real quick, if you're still listening to this, I'm assuming you got value from it. So I need your help specifically. My 2-year vision with this podcast is to help 100,000 physicians learn how investing in real estate can give you the freedom to practice medicine and live life how you want. There are 2 main ways that a podcast grows. One is through ratings and reviews, and the other is word of mouth. If you can please leave me a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, as well as send this to 1 to 2 friends that you think would get value from it, we can reach the physicians that we want to reach. Thanks in advance, and talk to you on the next episode. Please note that the information shared on this podcast is for informational purposes only. It should not be considered financial or medical advice. The views expressed on this podcast are those of the host and the guest, and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Department of Defense or the United States Air Force.